The other team that's formed is going to begin as what's called the Triple Entente. Entente is how you pronounce that strange French word. And during the war, they will become known as the Allied Powers as they expand their team beyond the original three that made up the Triple. Let's take a look at the history of this alliance. Back in 1894, France and Russia are going to join forces in another defensive alliance, just like the Germans and the Austrians had done. And over the course of the beginning of the 20th century, France and England, who had been traditionally long-standing rivals for basically forever, right, since about the year 1066, about 1,000 years before this, they're going to start to repair old grievances. They make an official declaration that they're going to move past different things in 1904, and events that happen in the years following, especially in 1905, where Wilhelm again is going to make this time the French people quite mad by interfering with the French colony of Morocco. Based on the aggressiveness of the German ruler, it's going to bring France and England even closer. So England then, who is now in an arms race with Germany, and France and Russia, who are already on a team, they are going to form a team together in 1907. France, England, and Russia are going to form the alliance known as the Triple Entente. So now you basically have two teams, right? Germany and Austria on the one side, England, France, and Russia on the other, and they're going to be basically the only shows in town. If you're not on one of these very powerful teams, you're going to be left to your own defenses, and you wouldn't want that situation to be the case. You're going to want to join one of these teams, even if it means eventually going to war. So now you've got basically every country in Europe agreeing to be one of these teams. And the nature of the agreements that they have, where if one country gets attacked, all the other countries have to go to bat for that team, it basically all it takes then is one country to attack one country to wrap up the entire continent in war. And that's what ends up happening after the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So another factor that caused the war was public opinion. People in Europe during the early 20th century were kind of hungry for war. There had not been a major war in Europe since 1815, when Napoleon was finally captured and sent away. So you've basically had a century of relative peace. And the Europeans, now several generations removed from their last major conflict, kind of forgot what war was all about and wanted more of it, especially because they were so in favor of competition. Right? The whole phenomenon of imperialism, of going out and taking over less powerful countries, this was not met with a whole lot of criticism at the time. In fact, it was met with very widespread public support. So when your public, when the people in your country are so supportive of going out and taking these countries over, they're also, by virtue of that, also supporting the competition against other European powers to get those places, right? They wanted to be better than other European countries. The Germans wanted to be the best. The British wanted to be the best. The French wanted to be the best, right? And to be the best, you had to beat the best, right? You had to take more colonies. You had to make more money. You had to advance your industry further. You had to do things that made your country stand out as the best. So the public is going to want that to happen. And that public opinion is going to be made louder and clearer by newspapers. Now think about how newspapers and magazines operate. They have to sell newspapers and magazines in order to make money. People aren't going to buy magazines and newspapers unless they like to read what they're seeing. So these newspapers also adopted the public opinion. Newspapers and magazines started publishing more and more headlines about the need to be competitive and aggressive towards other European countries. And once these newspapers and magazines started printing headlines like that, the government had no choice but to listen. And so the governments of these countries started to behave more aggressively towards others in Europe. And then you get down to the final cause, where the other causes were more long-term, building up over time. This was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, the final event, the thing that made it impossible to turn back. And it's kind of a combination of a lot of these different causes that results in this. So in the summer of 1914, a Serbian nationalist, this guy right here, his name is Gavrilo Princip, he's going to assassinate the person who is set to be the next emperor of Austria. His name is the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his wife. He's going to assassinate them in the city of Sarajevo, in the region at that point, it's a country now, of Bosnia. Now, this is important for us to understand because Gavrilo Princip was a Serbian nationalist. He was someone who believed that Serbians, as in Serbian people who spoke the Serbian language and had Serbian culture, he believed that they should all be ruled by the Serbian government. However, he lived in the Bosnian city of Sarajevo, which you can see has a Serbian population, but is controlled by German Austrians. So he was mad that his city was controlled by the German Austrians ruling from Vienna instead of being controlled by the Serbian government. So he decided, along with several other people who thought like him, to assassinate the emperor, or the Archduke. My apologies. So he does so. The Serbian press, their newspapers are going to be super happy that this happened. The Austrians are obviously going to be super mad. Made even madder when they find out that the Serbian government was actually involved in the assassination. But the Austrians are going to be kind of on the fence about whether to go to war. They're naturally on the fence about this because they know if they attack Serbia, they put themselves at risk of going to war with Russia, which is something they don't necessarily want to do. So they say, we aren't going to fight Serbia unless Germany, our ally, agrees to get into this fight with us. Germany does eventually agree, although it takes them some time, but they say to Austria, look, you need to go and attack Serbia quickly. You need to beat them before Russia can even get ready. But Austria does not do that. They move very slowly, and they aren't even ready to attack Austria or attack Serbia until the middle of August, about a month and a half after the actual assassination. And that gave Russia plenty of time to get ready. And so we end up with a very quick succession of dominoes falling. Right? This is what I call the road to war. Russia is going to get their army ready to fight Austria. Right? They say that Austria, we're going to go to war with you if you attack Serbia. Germany basically said, look, if you, Russia, are going to attack our buddy, Austria, then we're going to attack your buddy, France, right? Clearly now you've got several members of each team involved in kind of pointing their guns at one another. France and England, for their part, I abbreviate England by GB, Great Britain, they didn't necessarily want to have a fight, but they knew that they were a part of an alliance and they had to eventually support their team. Great Britain even tried to have a last-minute conference of all these different countries to try and solve the issues, but they were turned down as especially Russia, Austria, and Germany, they wanted to go to war. And you can see in this little political cartoon, you've got Serbia threatening Austria, Austria threatening Serbia, Russia threatening Austria, Germany threatening Russia, and France and England kind of chasing after all of them. And in the end, the war was kind of met with joy by the people in all these countries. As mentioned, the popular opinion was in favor of competition, in favor of aggressive behavior, and ultimately very much in favor of war. And each side had their own advantages to kind of capitalize on to start the war. The Triple Entente, France, Russia, and England, had certain material and military advantages, whereas Germany and Austria, being bordered with one another, had pretty um, favorable communication advantages compared to the others. You can see that communication advantage on this map. If you look, the major powers of the Triple Entente, Great Britain, France, and Russia. Let's forget about Italy for a second because they aren't going to be very helpful. Great Britain, France, and Russia. You've got these two over here and Russia over here. While that may look good for making Germany and Austria fight on two sides, they also are going to have a great deal of difficulty communicating with one another and moving goods and troops and weapons and other materials between one another. And that is exactly where Germany and Austria are going to have a greater degree of success. Even though they're fighting on two battle lines, one against Russia over here, one against Great Britain and France over here, they are going to have relative peace in the central parts of their country. There is no real air force that could reach this area right now. Planes were mostly used for spying during World War I, not for bombing. So they are not going to be vulnerable to an air attack in the middle of their country during this war. But on the other hand, you can look here, and if you see Great Britain, France, and Russia, and if you look at Germany and Austria in terms of the soldiers they have available, the money they have available to spend on their military, the number of battleships they have, different kinds of ships, right? The numbers are heavily in favor of Great Britain, France, and Russia instead of Germany and Austria, especially when the United States gets involved. You see the United States' numbers down here, although the United States will only be involved for about the final year or so of the conflict. And that is going to wrap it up for the causes of the war. The next video will talk about the nature of the combat itself. Sorry for putting this in two videos. Again, I accidentally hit escape in the middle of this video, so there's that. So next video is coming at you about the nature of the conflict.